Every story you love, every invention that moves you, every idea you wished was yours, all began as nothing. Just a blank page with a blinking cursor, asking a simple question. What do you see? Great ideas start on Mac. Find out more on apple.com/Mac.
The detective said missing kids usually come home. What happens when they don't?
Based on a true story.
Police looking for John Gacy.
We discovered bodies. By the looks of it, they're younger men.
The things he did to those kids. He's sick.
The system failed these families.
Devil in Disguise, John Wayne Gacy. Streaming now, only on Peacock.
Do you know how many there are?
Up to you to find out.
Welcome to Why We Roll, a tabletop role-playing game design podcast by the Stillfleet Studio. We're your hosts, Chris Pickett, creator of the historical fantasy game Dance Macabre, and Wythe Marshall, creator of the political sci-fi game Stillfleet. Through the show, we hope to amplify new creative voices. We chat with different indie TTRPG designers, talking through a range of questions that are pertinent to many designers, players, and GMs. We hope to showcase fresh and even challenging ideas about what makes imagination-based games so powerful. Before we introduce today's guest, a reminder. If you enjoy this episode, please consider supporting the show and all of our games over at patreon.com/Stillfleet. Okay, let's find out why we roll. Hey there, welcome to Why We Roll, the tabletop role-playing game design podcast from the Stillfleet Studio. I'm Wythe Marshall.
I'm Chris Pickett.
And we're joined today by a wonderful professional game designer, writer, interesting person, Claire Carré, a friend who I'm just happy to catch up with. So Claire, thanks so much for making time. I'm sure you're busy to just, nerd out about RPGs.
Thanks so much for having me today. I'm super stoked to join you both.
Awesome. Before we get into it, just want to say, if you're enjoying the show, you can support us on Patreon. It's patreon.com/Stillfleet. And, at the end and in the show notes, we'll talk about ways to get in touch with Claire if you're interested in her work. But thanks as usual for listening. And, to our patrons, we couldn't make the show without you. Okay, so why we roll? Claire, do you want to just give us a little introduction? Who are you? And, I guess, do just a little short self-intro here.
Sure. Hey, everyone. My name is Claire Carré. My pronouns are they, she. And I am currently working as the narrative director at Naughty Dog. I have also worked as a television show creator, a film writer and director, and a music video director.
That's really cool. We are not often joined by... Well, I shouldn't say that. I think a lot of the designers that we talk to certainly are video game consumers, but we don't really get to talk to many designers of video games. So I'm very excited to get into it with you today. Claire, I did want to ask though, how did you get started with games? How did you get started playing games? And when was there like a moment where you realized that you wanted to make games?
I started playing games pretty young. My first really exposure to games was my grandpa had a computer, and I get to play it when I would go over to his house, and he had King's Quest IV,
nice,
Perils of Rosalia. I was like, every time I would go over to his house, I was like, oh my God, I'm obsessed. I have to play this, right? And then I was lucky enough as a kid, my dad was also a pretty big computer nerd, so I eventually, when I was 8, got my own Amiga 500, which I was extremely stoked to have. And so then I got into playing a lot of LucasArts games, especially my love, Monkey Island. So I played a lot of point-and-click adventures as a kid, which I was extremely into. So played a lot of that. And then I also, around age 7, got my first introduction to Dungeons and Dragons, which I became pretty obsessed with. Although I spent a lot of time reading the player's handbook by myself because it was really hard to get other people to play with me. yeah, that was, I went to performing arts camp when I was a kid and got hit in the face with a stick right before I think it was like a day or two before I was supposed to go. So I didn't like audition for all the like musicals and stuff that I was intending to be in, and instead spent the whole time like playing second edition Dungeons and Dragons at camp, so then by the time I came back, I was like, I know how to play. I'm it. But again, no one else that I do. I spend a lot of time like making characters and reading books and stuff.
I think that's a very relatable situation that many of us may have found ourselves in, is being like, man, this would be super fun to play with my friends. No one one's interested.
That's young.
That is very young.
That was like an issue at like 12. So at 7, I mean, some kids, we were all reading, but some kids were like were struggling to read, period, much less the complicated, like, lists of early modern crap you could buy with silver and electrum coins. And just, it's kind of a lot of Fantasia work for a little kid.
We're trying to grok
that's interesting.
Thaco, even like trying to comprehend the inscrutable mechanics that are Thaco in second edition D&D.
Yeah. Oh my gosh, Thaco, did bring you back for real? Yeah. So
never again, Thaco.
Yeah, I spent a lot of time making like characters for all my friends. Right, I was like, I could get them on board with like building characters. I was like, okay, who do you want to be? Okay, cool, right? But then in elementary school, especially, getting people to actually like show up for a game was like, forget it.
Right.
But anyway, so I didn't, and it wasn't until like middle school that I really found people to play D&D with, and from then on, like I found my people. I found my current best friends are still my friends that I played D&D with in high school.
Wow,
that's awesome.
That's wild.
That's really cool.
My best people at my wedding, like they're my bros. So that was how we met.
That's incredible.
But tangent, but related to what we're talking about. But yeah, and two of those friends ended up going on to form a game company together. So that was like a little bit of a clue of like, oh yeah, that's a thing you can do, right? But I didn't really know that at the time, right? I was sort of like, okay, I love acting, I love writing, I love making stories, I love film, I love performance, I love all these things. I love so I was like, I'm gonna be a director. That's like, at first I was like, I want to be an actor. And I was like, no, actually I want to be a director. That's like kind of what I want to do. So starting around like 14, I was like, that's my future. I want to do directing. And it wasn't until much later, actually, until I'd made my first feature, that I was like, wait, actually the thing that I'm inspired by the most, right, like life goals, right, up until that point had been like make a feature and have a cat, pretty much. And I was like, okay, I've done those two things, my two life goals, right? Like, and then I was like, okay, now what's next for me? And I was like, actually, the thing that I'm being most emotionally affected by in life right now is games. Like, that's really where I'm feeling like emotionally connected. Like, and I've always loved games, but I just never really thought about making them as a possibility. But I want to learn how to do that. And in particular, like The Last of Us and Mass Effect 2, for different reasons, but really had an impact on me around that time. And my sister happened to send me the website for NYU Game Center's MFA program. And I was like, oh, wait, there's a place you can go and learn how to do this. I'm going to check that out.
That's incredible. Yeah, it seems like, it makes sense that, there's a connection between kind of like playing D&D young. And it seems like a lot of the games that you've gravitated towards, like Monkey Island, like a lot of these point and click adventures that are extremely narrative heavy. And then, to find yourself being like, oh no, I'm deeply emotionally invested in The Last of Us and like these very like narrative driven games. It makes sense that you would want to go into cinema as well. And you can kind of see like the forever GM also as a kind of director role where it's like, I want to make the world. I want to make the thing.
Yeah. Yeah, and speaking of worlds, you mentioned a lot of games there in rapid succession. So I'm just curious to sort of punch in on some of your influences. Because I think I believe you've played other games besides D&D, and this show we love to highlight just like other bangers, whether they're sort of forgotten older canon, or they're indie games. But yeah, what were some other favorite game worlds or favorite aspects of TTRPGs when you first discovered physical games specifically? And I think we'll probably have other questions about video games and that connection, because I think that's really the one reason we wanted to talk to you specifically. But I'm just curious about other aspects of gaming besides character creation and D&D, which I think so many of us, that was like, for sure, that session 0 was maybe the only session you'd get when you're 12. Was okay, you made a ranger and we'll never find out what happens with them. But yeah, what were some other games that did you discover? I guess I should ask, other physical games as a kid.
I was really into Cyberpunk, like the OG. That was like I really was feeling that. And I also got really into World of Darkness, especially in high school and also in my 20s. I LARPed. I did a lot of LARPing of Vampire the Masquerade.
Hell yeah.
Yeah, so that was like very formative. Cause like, that was like, those books were like coming out. Like,
yeah,
it was like,
yeah. There was an energy there.
Like, this is like I'm ye olde, you guys. Like, so this was like in the 90s, right? So like, those books were coming out like when I was in high school. So it was like, oh my gosh, there's a new release. Go to the store, get it. Like, there's a new, like one of the ones that I've always wanted to play. And again, this is another one of like, I have the book. I love the book, but I've never found like the group willing to fully commit to playing it, is Wraith. And that was like, that book and that world sort of like dropped. And I was like, oh, this is incredible. So that was that, like the whole World of Darkness, was sort of like being expanded.
Yeah. I had the same experience, but I was too insecure to LARP. So I played Vampire, but we didn't LARP. And I got the same thing with Wraith. I read Wraith and thought, this is mind blowing. The setting is actually really weird and different, because the rest of the games are like, and the company was in Atlanta and I'm from Atlanta. So it was like, wow, this is like, it felt more real than D&D for that reason. But with Wraith, it was like, okay, no, the setting is like purgatory. So it was like very, very different, but no one was interested in that at all. I would describe it to my friends and they were like, that sounds terrible. Can I be a werewolf or vampire? Can I be like a hulking superhero?
Yeah.
I don't want to be like a sad ghost.
Where's the power fantasy?
Yeah. So interesting how that was a response to like Wraith was like a weird dud, just generally. I don't know.
I kind of feel like Powered by the Apocalypse, like Monster Hearts has a little bit of what Wraith, in that like in Wraith, like you were playing your Wraith, but you also played someone else's shadow, right? So you were kind of also being someone else's dark side a little bit. So there was it had like a lot of inherent angst, okay? Which I feel like you need a bunch of like people who are like kind of like theater kids in a way to be like, yes, I want to get dark. I want to get into the feels, but to kind of like really get into like, yes, I want to get super role playing vibes. That's what I want out of this experience, right? Which is very different than some of their other games.
Yeah, I have not read Wraith, and I feel like Wythe, you're much more the in-house expert on like the White Wolf, World of Darkness kind of stuff. But
big fan.
Maybe this is a tangent or an aside, but do the two of you feel like Wraith was maybe just before its time? Because I agree, like there's a lot of PBTA games kind of lean more into like, how do we get into the feels of this narrative moment, while also getting kind of weird sometimes, like Monster Hearts. Yeah, I don't know. That's yeah. Do you feel like it was just ahead of its time in some ways?
Yeah, it's funny. I mean, if this is I think I'd love to hear what Claire thinks, but from the in-house, like we encounter this all the time, even now after the OSR and the NSR with publishing NSR games, where people are like, okay, but can you tell me more about really specific tactical combat? And we're like, well, we don't make games about other than maybe Danse Macabre, right? But like our other games aren't really about specific tactical combat. They're about like narrative pushes and pulls and things. Again, inspired by PBTA, et cetera. And all the way back, to maybe Wraith, for me, Vampire more, but like Vampire still was, if you think about it, a lot of it comes down to sort of versions of combat, but it definitely was for me an aha moment away from D&D, where like it wasn't primarily or only about combat. It was about like people. And so I think that is an evolution. And to your point, there might have been, it's like the 80-20 thing, and there might have been games at that point in time that were just a little too weird for people who were used to playing D&D and Call of Cthulhu, et cetera. And they just couldn't quite grok the like, wait, I'm me, but I'm a ghost, but I'm also part of your ghost. And it's like I have to like be into Jungian like psychology. But like Claire, I've never actually played Wraith. So it's funny. I've played Vampire and Werewolf, I've never played Wraith. So I feel like Claire, we just have to maybe play Wraith. That's the whole separate.
I think
separate episode.
I think this is.
I'm so there for that.
Yeah, I think this is a call to action. I'll finally read it, and then we can all play together.
They came out with like, and I don't have it in front of me, but like they came out with like a version of Wraith that was kind of like a campaign that made it a little bit more actiony in a way, and I think that was a little bit more successful. But I kind of like the original, like super moody one. There was also, I mean, now I'm just going on a White Wolf tangent, but they also Mage was really interesting too in terms of like how they handled magic. I think was really like, again of its time as well. With magic and the technocracy, it was also like, right. I can't remember if it came out before or just around the time of the Matrix, but it was like very much, it was a very interesting way of handling.
I believe it was before.
Belief was very savvy in that way.
Yeah, that's a really good point. Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off. I just get really excited about Mage, because Mage is legit also was mind blowing as a kid. That to have the magic be anything you can imagine and have rules for that worked, even if clunkily or however we would now say, oh, someone could have done something better. But like I've never seen that. I barely seen it implemented well since then. So in the mid 90s, that was like mind blowing. Totally different than D&D. So. Sorry, that was so. Again, I if you have more to say about games that inspired
those were all ones that I played a lot in my youth. I played a little bit of Shadowrun, but I was way more into Cyberpunk, to be honest. Was more my steez.
Yeah. The Arthasorian classic. Well, so Claire, what are some tabletop games that you're playing right now? I mean, I know that you're enmeshed in creating narrative worlds for audiovisual media, but what's some of the stuff that you're into at the moment?
I mean, I'm going to say recently. I'm going to use a broad use of okay. But stuff I've played. Okay, I'm going to use within the last year. Okay. Broadly recently, I've played. I got together and was playing actually with some friends from middle school. We all were like, let's get back together and play again, which was really fun. So we played a version of a game that started in Ravenloft and then became a Shadowrun game, which was pretty fun. I played a one shot Varn one shot, which was pretty neat. I just played some basic 5th ed. I played a little bit of a Scum and Villainy game, which I was eager to play. I would like to play. Blades in the Dark is definitely a system that I've been wanting to play more of and haven't had much of a chance. And I've also played some, not that recently, but in the broader recently, I've played some Powered by the Apocalypse games like Masks and stuff.
Nice.
That's all stuff that I've played relatively recently. Stuff that I would like to play. I would like to play Stillfleet, for example. So play both of your and Dance Macabre. I'd like to play both of your games.
Make that happen.
But it's like, yeah, that would be extremely cool. I have the hardcover.
Hey.
I have the legit to use it. Okay. It's so beautiful. But something that I really would like to, I feel like, and this is like an achievable goal, I think, is I really love like one sheet indie TTRPGs. Like, and I'm like, friends, it's not that big of a time commitment. There's not that many rules. It's literally on one page, and there's so many really, really cool, awesome, weird, one-page games. I mean, John Harper has like a ton of really interesting ones, but there's also just like a lot of really funky ones, and like Anna Anthropy has a bunch of really interesting ones, and like there's just like I love this whole like the kind of like the fanzine culture of indie TTRPGs, and I would love to get more people to be like, hey, no, you don't need to prepare. This is just gonna have a fun time. Don't overthink it. Like, let's just sit down and play this fun thing. And then I've seen a lot of really fun ones. I have a big a kind of like a folder of PDF of those that I'd love to play with some folks.
That's awesome. Yeah, I'm a big fan of the single pagers as well. I think we're actually talking with a friend about producing something similar to that with him at the moment. But yeah, I got to say, John Harper's I think World of Dungeons, which is his like miniaturization of Dungeon World to like even smaller. I think it's the perfect OSR game in a lot of ways, and it's just one page back and front, very simple rules, but it gets all of like old school D&D down just in a tiny package. I love it.
Yeah, I've only written one page game because I like more maximalist games. I find one page games are a little underthought for my taste generally. Although I read all of like Grant Howitt's because they're funny. And for one-offs, I agree. They could always fun for one-offs. Yeah. Anything you're doing with friends is fun for a goof. Although you don't need to prep a lot to play bigger games too. You know what I mean? Like they're giving you tools, you don't have to use all of them. But the one that I wrote so far was last year. It was a very dark game about resisting the rise of fascism in the U.S. But it was written in a little bit of a sarcastic tone. So I'm thinking of actually like marketing it this year because it was just a freebie for a game jam. But it's called Battle Fellas. So yeah, I'm looking forward to doing, hopefully, I don't know if we should ask Will if we're allowed to say this, but Will's Gaucho game as our first official marketed, game where we did not make a one-page game. We're taking a one-page game by someone and publishing it. So we're dipping our toes into that world of like, hey, here's a game that takes very little time to read and you could just get going immediately, which is a different design challenge for sure. Yeah. So, I think that's that also is something we can talk about, when we get to, which maybe is a good segue to another question, but your game design practice yourself, Claire, because obviously designing video games is not going to be exactly like RPGs. But before we get into the video games, which I keep putting off, but can you tell us, do you design, just to get out of the way, do you design anything for RPGs? Do you do house rules? Do you do settings? What is your sort of relationship? Do you do one-page games? And, maybe that's, again, a segue toward what you do more of now.
Well, I will answer that question, but I just want to throw it out there since I know you have an awesome studio with multiple people making games there. I would love if you all made a book of like one-page games. I think that would be sick, because they're really fun and weird. And so I have to like hunt, like they often are like just randomly on the internet from different people and like whatever, and like getting like a collection, like a little collection would be pretty rad. So just throwing it out there.
Challenge accepted.
I do have to say, Rowan Rick and Deckard publishes Grant Howitt's now in I think there's more than one volume, and those are sick. That is it's a wonderful book. Just because you get so many ideas, it's like a lot of crap. So I love that challenge. That's awesome.
Yeah.
Put another. So I actually like in terms of like tabletop, like I actually really prefer to be a player. Generally, I rarely GM. I guess. I don't know. Maybe it's just because it's like too close to my work normally. I'm not sure why, but like in life, I've rarely GM'd. I've almost always been a player. But I have been doing, GMing for my kid lately. So I don't know how often you guys talk about tabletop games for kids, but just to bring that to your audience here, like I had to learn on first edition D&D, but there's a whole world of tabletop games that are specifically like relatively rules light for kids now, which is pretty awesome. So some that I've run recently are Perils and Princesses, My Little Pony, and Magical Kitty Save the Day, which are all pretty delightful and also pretty rules light, and are like very easy to pick up. And we started, I think, doing that when she was around 6, maybe a little younger. And like, yeah, totally easy to pick up. There's stats, there's roles, but it's like, there's 3, you know what I mean? Yeah, they're very fun. But when I was getting my MFA, to answer your question about designing tabletop games, when I was getting my MFA in game design at NYU, I did create a couple original tabletop games. 2 of them in particular. One was called Come Out and Play, which was like a one-shot about the experience of coming out, which if you're interested, I can tell you about that. And then the other one was called Asteroids and Androids, and it was a deck-based tabletop one-shot builder, which was basically like the size of a tarot deck. And so it was completely card-based game, and I can also tell you about that if you're interested as well.
Yeah, I would love to hear about Come Out and Play. I mean, that's such a specific experience, and how do you mechanicalize it? How do you kind of like, what's the process of playing that?
Yeah, so basically, I'll kind of like it's a relatively short game. Like again, it like is meant to be sort of like a one shot. You could play it in, you know, depending on how long you want to. Like with it, like it's probably like a half hour to an hour game, not that long, right? It's really like a one sitting type experience. But for 3 to 5 players. So we had a series of settings, about 6 settings. And so you would choose from these different setting modules as a group. And the settings we had was like an office, a youth group, a funeral, a sports team, a school, and Thanksgiving dinners. So sort of like social situations that you might be in. Okay. And so then each player would get several personality traits and would give a few positive and negative, and would give them to other players and would say why they perceive that trait in the other person. And one of the things I really like, and I should say that I didn't just design this by myself. I designed it with Michelle Earhart and Jeff Petrolio. So it was a 3-person group making this together. But one of the things I really like about this aspect of it is like normally you build your own character, and in this, you're sort of other people are building your character, which I think is really interesting for this a game that's kind of like on this topic, because it's so much dealing with like your other people's perceptions of you, overcoming their perceptions of you, like your fears of other people's perceptions. And in this case, like your character is kind of being built by other people's perceptions of you. Yeah. That's so like other people are giving you your traits to build your character. And then each player gets 3 physical traits, face down. You each, of those 3, each person will choose one and say why they're proud of that physical trait, and one that they're self-conscious of, and then discard the last one. And then you've got, say of these, you choose whatever. So you choose funeral. There'll be six roles available at that scene. And you can choose amongst those 6, or you can roll, to see who you want to get. If I'm looking at it now, it's like, you can have like best friend of the deceased, funeral director, enemy of the deceased, right? Like there's different choices. Or like a youth group, you can have like the youth pastor, the agnostic kid, the sinner, right? We had like a bunch of different, like each one have like different choices, right? Or like the sports team, there's like the bench warmer, the all-star, the new transfer, right? We have like sort of like different sort of like choices within those, right? So you've got that, you choose your role, and then reaction cards are dealt out. So everyone will get reaction cards except one person will get the come out card. And that's the person who is going to come out during this scene. And so it's basically, this game is just one scene. You play out this scenario. You're being your role within this, within this situation. And then whoever got the come out card needs to come out at the time of their choosing, right? During this situation. And the other people, they've gotten a type of reaction to someone coming out. And some of those are supportive and some of them are not, right? But you've gotten the reaction that you've gotten, and then they're going to react accordingly within this situation. So it's like there's no combat. Okay. Right. It's all just like kind of like, it's very role playing heavy. It's also very reaction oriented, and which I also think is kind of like interesting, but I think it takes advantage of how I think role playing with the right safeties and the right people, it creates like a safe space for exploring new experiences and identities, whether you are someone who's interested in coming out or you get to experience, maybe that's not for you, but like what that can be like, I think it's an interesting opportunity to explore that socially.
Yeah.
Totally.
It strikes me as really powerful to have these kind of like, layers of identity that are foisted upon you in a lot of ways, like by the game and by like the process of creating a character. But then like even having the reaction cards and things, it's like you don't even know how your character is going to react or if they're the one coming out until the game starts. So it builds a lot of tension that way. But it's also I forgot where I was going with that, but
well, I have a follow-up to that, which is just, because this was at NYU, right? So you're in a college setting, teaching or being part of an academic community with younger people, some of whom I'm sure are like going through, questioning identity and like how they are going to express themselves in the world.
That's what I was saying.
College is often a safer space. Maybe that Chris, I don't know if that has anything to do with what you were going to ask,
but you're good.
But Claire, I'm wondering like so you worked with other designers and just in the setting of a college, having this game about a sensitive topic, as you say, that's something we talk a lot about. Like Chris and I talk a lot about RPGs being a powerful way to have discussions in a community that are kind of deeper and scary and whatever. And it's a little weird to do that with like other forms of, I don't know, social activity, but like role-playing games specifically, you're putting on a role and it has, you can have safety rules. It ends at a certain time. So it's like, you can have a almost delimited, like, let's get weird for an hour and a half or whatever, So I'm just curious if you have any reflections on that game specifically and how you, if you play tested it or how it sort of works in practice. Cause it sounds, like really powerful and an interesting idea. So you definitely sound like you are designing RPGs, even if you haven't done it for a while because you've been a little busy. But I'm just curious if you have anything else to add there. No worries if not. But
yeah, I mean, I think it's pretty explicit what it's about. So if you don't want to play a game about that, then you shouldn't. You know what I mean? Like it's not like a surprise like within the game. Like it's like straight up like what the game is, right? So I think that's it's a little bit like on the label, which I think is helpful on some level for this type of game. But I do think that I do think it's also helpful actually that like you get the reaction that you get, right? Like you're like, that was given to me by a card, because having to, I think it can be really challenging. This is like, I don't know how much you guys talk about Nordic LARPs and stuff, but like those can get complex, right? So, but like, if you like not every reaction to coming out is, let me give you a big hug, I'm so excited. Right.
Yeah.
And some of them are like, there's a spectrum, right, of reaction. I think that's also like one of the benefits of this being within like a role-playing context, right? But you're like, hey, like I played the card I was given, and my card was to have this negative reaction, right? And I played that well, right?
Sorry. And what is a Nordic LARP for those of us who are trying to compare the deep thing you're talking about to some other thing we may not know anything about?
I don't know what I can do. I'm probably not going to do the description justice, but it's a style of LARPing that was developed in Scandinavia that is very immersive and tends to be more of like serious, where it's like you will have like 3-day weekends where it's like everyone's playing a role on a submarine and you're fully living it for the weekend, and you're on a submarine and that is happening. But there also will do topics that are like everyone's in we're doing the Holocaust, for example, right? Like, or like we're doing a gay conversion camp. And like, so like everyone has to be kind of taking it like you have to be kind of taking it pretty seriously, and everyone there has to be a certain level of, I don't want to say professionalism, but a certain for something like that to be able to work.
Gotcha.
And also like a lot of talking about what we went through and why we did this, and a lot of like post game talk about the experiences.
Right. And that's where because tabletop RPGs grew out of wargaming with miniatures and simulating combat on paper. But that's where it's RPGs are moving more toward like clinical psychology, and like controlled kind of like therapeutic settings. And it's interesting that there's like this Venn diagram of kind of ways to engage with like imagining ourselves as other, and you can do it therapeutically, you can do it for totally just like murdering goblins, letting out, catharsis. But that sounds really deep. That's a really interesting way to game. So I definitely want to look up and learn more about it.
It's also
specifically that. Yeah.
It's also very different than what my assumption was, which was that it was going to be like a LARP weekend where everyone's playing like historical Norse people, but then it accidentally turns into an alt-right training camp or something like that. That's where my mind went. This sounds
that's bad. That would be
sounds
bad
way more interesting.
I think it's there's a lot of really interesting ones, but they're like, they require like a lot of commitments. But I think there's an annual Nordic LARP conference. I think one just recently happened, so you should check out the video. I think they release videos from them, so you guys should check that out.
That's interesting. But I do see the similarity in like with Come Out and Play, where there is a seriousness to the embodiment of the character that you've kind of been given. It's interesting because it takes a lot of choices around building the character away from you, but then still asks you to step into that, which I think is a unique experience.
I'm sorry. I know this is audio. I was nodding.
No, I know.
No, we'll put in the sound of the nod.
Yeah. There will be an audible nod sound. I'll Foley it in later. It'll sound like a spring.
The other tabletop game that I was developing was called Asteroids and Androids, and it was a deck-based tabletop game. The idea was it was inspired by an experience that I had where I had a layover in San Francisco for like a few hours, and I was met by my friend Dan Fabulich, who was my D&D friend from high school, who then started a game company, and we only had it was like 2 hours or something stopover on the airport. I think I was like on my way to Hong Kong or something. And so he busted out this game, Misery Bubblegum, which I don't know if you guys have played before. But it's like a little cute little card-based game. And we were able to just sort of like play this game at the airport, no prep, really fun. And I was like, one of the biggest challenges as an adult to playing tabletop games with my friends is GM prep. Wife, you're like, I have no problem with that. I'm cool.
Why are you prepping? What are you prepping? These are conversations we can have, but please go ahead and describe your game that you made that is, I'm sure, fabulous. And
I was like, it's hard to get, scheduling. Okay, scheduling is a problem, and people having time is a problem. So I was like, I want to make something like that where it's just like, it's like a little deck that is portable, it's replayable, it requires no prep, it's like has pick up and play rules where you can just like bust it out with your friends and you can just play a quick one shot. And you can build your characters, build the game, and play it right then and there. That was sort of like my goal for making this game. So so basically it's all on the cards. It's a space adventure role-playing game. It's like kind of plays in, it's like a little tropey, but in sort of a fun way. So you create a story, that arcs over 10 scenes. One person plays like the narrator and the rest of the players are crew members. It has 2 phases. There's a build phase. And again, all the instructions are on the card, so that's all you need. There's a in the build phase, the crew build their characters and the narrator builds the story by pulling okay, this is going to be, this is going to be the nemesis. This is going to be the NPCs. These are going to be the locations, right? They're pulling all that stuff while you're building, your character, like you're building your department, your drive, your natural talent, your personal challenge, your skill, like you're building that, you're from the options of cards for those, you're pulling what you want for your character. You're building those at the same time. And then in story phase, you go through 10 scenes, that the narrator has kind of like quickly built out. And each one has sort of like a look ahead and a play section for each story card. So look ahead helps the narrator sort of like prep what they need for the next scene so they can sort of like do good setup for what's coming next. And then you play through that scene. So I had like a few different scenarios for it. Like, for example, like there was one called the Far Reaches and there was one called the Heist. So like they're different. The idea was to sort of create some different story structure scaffolding for the group. But then a lot of flexibility for them to put together these different pieces. Like there was a lot of different sort of like characters and ships and settings and stuff like that for them to sort of like pull from sort of like relatively fast and loose.
Yeah, that's super cool. There's a PBTA game kind of like that I've seen that's all cards. But it's interesting. I'd be interested to play your version because it sounds maybe more generative, because the other one, while nice and well produced, it felt very specific, and it's almost like I wanted it as a book to try to digest the information. I found myself reading all the cards, do you know what I mean, to try to understand what the hell's going on. Whereas I think what you're describing sounds like a good way to use the fact that the cards are kind of random and loose, and they're touchstones for prompting a thought. So I think that's a really cool, interesting, different way to design games. So both those games sound great. Yeah. So clearly these games.
It was fun to work on. I mean, I think the Fiasco has put out a card-based version.
Oh, has it?
Know
that would make sense. Yeah. I could totally see that. Yeah, I didn't know that either.
This was in 2016, and I think a few other folks have put out like card-based tabletop games. I'm not sure how similar they are to this, but anyway, I mean, I did make and playtest a bunch of versions, and it was totally playable, and I played a bunch of games with it. It was fun, but I never got the like actually producing it or whatever phase.
Well, we got to talk about that.
Yeah,
but,
if you
in the
want
interest
to talk,
yeah, you know where to find us over here in New York City. In the interest of time, I don't know why I'm doing mobster voice. We should ask about video games, which is your specific expertise. Obviously, you know your stuff with TTRPGs as well, but we brought you on to kind of talk about some of your work. Also movies, right? So you've done all kinds of professional things there. So Chris, I don't know, do you want to take kind of the next question? But I figure we should sort of move into that realm.
Yeah, I mean, I think I can maybe combine a couple of questions. So I mean, Claire, you've done writing, you've done directing, you've done kind of like speculative stories outside of games. Can you tell us a little bit about your work as a storyteller outside of games, and do you see a path where that kind of led you into game design?
Yeah, I mean, it's all just coming up with stuff, right? I mean, kind of. Yeah, I mean, the power of imagination. Yeah, I mean, kind of, right? Like, I love imagining things. I mean, I think more specifically, like the stuff that I get really excited about is kind of like exploring what it means to be human. Like I've in trying to think about like, what's the thread between all the different stuff that I've done? Like, what's the commonality of like what gets me hyped? And I think that's the thing that I always come back to. That's really like motivating for me, that I just am fascinated by. Like, what are the, not like kind of like the opposite of what are the limits to that, right? Like what's beyond, like how I feel like people put such narrow limits generally on the idea of humanness that I often am pushing against. That's why I love playing characters that aren't human, for example. So I think that that's kind of been a creative through line in my work in every medium. Like when I was doing music videos, I did a music video for Sia, and I was kind of exploring expression beyond words, like with sign language and dance and shadow puppetry. I made my feature film Embers was exploring like who are we without memory. I made a TV show called Silent History for AMC that was based on an amazing it was an adaptation of an amazing book that was about like what if people were born without language. Like how would they communicate? Would they communicate in other ways? Would those actually be better possibly and allow for more connection? Like I think I'm very interested in like, well, when you don't have something, it's not just taking something away, right? It's open door, I think. I worked on an adaptation of Death with Interruptions for Apple based on the Jose Saramago book, which was also like, well, what if you could prevent death? What if death wasn't a problem anymore? Well, then what happens, right? So I'm very interested. Ursula Le Guin is a big inspiration for me. She always like talks about like what if questions, and that's definitely my jams. So the first game that I worked on, which just came out, is called because it just came out. Lovesick, which is a VR game about a supernatural event that forces a band to confront if they should break up or not. So that was for that, like it was very coming into it. They had kind of like an idea of what they wanted to do, and then sort of like getting into like, what should this be? What should the supernatural event be? Like, I think I like asking like these push questions that push things to get interesting to me.
And was Lovesick was when you kind of transitioned into full-time game design?
Yeah, I mean, I was still working in television at the same time, but
So, and that's a VR game, right? So that's kind of taking some of your experience in directing and storytelling visually, but also you're, as a writer, bringing the narrative and like putting it all together in this environment, which is different than pen and paper and traditional video games, but super cool that you've kind of explored storytelling and making choices about human emotions through these different media. Because certainly I agree with you that what does it mean to be human? I mean, it's something, again, Chris and I talk a lot about on the show because we're both fans of like body horror, biopunk, like, narratives that kind of question this sort of central place of humanity in this sort of Enlightenment liberal conception of the world, which many of us on the left have like very serious critiques of, and I think one of the critiques being like, well, if who gets to be human, right? Yeah. That's the traditional way to sort of criticize the Enlightenment, is like all these guys are saying nice things about quote unquote humanity, and yet almost all of them own slaves, right? And so it's like that, or own people who were under the condition of slavery. They were not just slaves, right? But I think that's an interesting way to start any game, is kind of questioning like who is the character and how does it connect to the human player. So there's that sort of distance with you're the person having fun, the fun haver, and then your avatar in the game, and how close are you or distant are you? And you can have those really touching moments, like you're saying about a game that explores something deeply or gets Nordic with it, I guess, over 3 days of kind of psychological boot camp method acting. Or you can have like a lot of distance. And it'd be interesting to hear your reflections, as we talk about, how video games are different than RPGs in that way, because they enable different closeness or distance, I guess, if that makes sense. But yeah, that's just cool to hear that you went from kind of visuals into video games and have also done TTRPGs. So you've kind of done a mix there.
Triple threat.
Triple threat, yeah. I don't know why we're like talking. Yeah, it's like sports terms.
Yeah. I mean, I think that was one of the things when I was, originally, when I was like, oh man, that's what I'm so excited about with games, is that sense of identification, right? That I think is so different with games compared to linear media, right? Like when you watch, like you can really like sink into your seat and like dissolve into a movie and like really live through this experience vicariously that someone's having in a film. But you're never like, oh man, I like what I did in that movie was crazy.
Yeah.
Man, like when I jumped across that thing in that movie, like I didn't know if I was going to make that landing, right? You would never say that about a movie, right? You just talk about like like moved you were by the experience and like how connected you felt to the person in the movie, right? But when you're talking about your experiences in a game, you're talking about what you did, like even playing the character, like it like sometimes you really are, depending on the game, like you're developing, it's more of an avatar or less, right? Sometimes it's a very specific person, but you still talk about them in the first person, which is very unique to games.
Yeah, it's interesting, and I think this is going to be something we talk about with video games in just a second. But the video games to me are more, even though I understand, I think what you're saying, and you tell me what you think, but video games are more agential, like TTRPGs. I see video games as more cinematic, like movies, where they don't have, to me, that kind of agency. And I think that's like an interesting subjective thing of like, what kind of agency or avatar making or inhabiting do you like? Because I really like movies, but I completely agree that it's very rare to feel in any way that deeply sort of complicit or something. So even if you're moved by them in the way you are by a dream, like something happened to you and you're the object, you're not the subject. Whereas in RPGs, I feel like even the dumbest goblin murderiest RPG, you are clearly the subject, and you get to have so much fun with that of like, I'm going to name my machete for killing goblins. Right. And, whatever. And every little choice you get to kind of, detail and craft, even with, some GM who's very by the books playing a strict OSR grinder thing, like you still get to say fun stuff and make up fun backstories. And so I think there's kind of a difference there. And I think video games maybe, now that they're so, good, basically, they can kind of do both, right? They can pick and choose when they're doing both. So in a way, it's giving you different tools. I would imagine, again, having never designed a video game.
I think it depends on the type of game as well, right? Like I keep thinking of Disco Elysium, which I've played through a few times, and a friend of mine is playing it right now. So we were just chatting about it earlier today. And yeah, I was like, well, what kind of cop are you in Disco Elysium? But it's like not what kind of cop is your character, it's like, what kind of cop are you? So there is this like level of embodiment to it. And, with Disco Elysium, it's a little bit on the rails, but you do have a very heavy hand in like crafting the personality of your character and like the way in which he specifically interacts with the world. But then, like Call of Duty, you're a guy with a gun. You're always a guy with a gun. Like that. There's a different kind of embodiment that happens.
Gun
there.
guy. Yeah, you're gun guy.
Yeah, everyone loves gun guy in this country.
Right. I think that's like, I think there's a spectrum, right? And different games choose like character creation, like how much of a specific person are you? Like I'm a huge Disco Elysium fan, but like you're Harry. Yeah. You're not Harry.
Yeah, you're always going to be Harry.
But like you're Harry. I'm Harry, right? I wouldn't say Harry did this in Disco Elysium. I would say like, oh man, like I maxed out Shivers and I heard some crazy stuff that blew my mind, right? Like I chose to do. I would still talk about myself in the first person because I am Harry, in Disco Elysium.
Yeah, my necktie won't stop yelling at me and calling me gendarme.
Yeah,
the first time I played, I died in the first 5 minutes.
Wow, that's like impressive.
If I'm ever going to plug a video game, it's definitely going to be Disco Elysium. It's great.
Yeah, same. I mean, I think we're required to.
As it's so close to TTRPG in kind of like mechanics and experience.
It's also a global north left critique of Empire that is very funny. So I think as a leftist podcast in 2025, we're like required. But it is really it's one of the only games recently. Probably I've spent the most time playing, like, other than like dumb phone games, which are just completely dumb and like I don't consider it all related to this discussion. Disco Elysium and Caves of Code are probably like the games I've like legitimately played the most of. So I think this is a good transition. There's one more transitional piece before you get to the grand, like, tell us all about video games, which is because you did academic game design before going into video games full time, right? That was kind of the hinge point between your career in Hollywood and video games. Is that correct? Just timeline wise, Claire, that you went back and did the game design program, or am I wrong in the timeline?
So I was working in made my feature, and then I went to, and I was like, I want to learn about games. I started doing the MFA program at NYU. Then I had the good fortune to have some opportunities in television. So actually, the show that I was working on, Silent History for AMC, I had to leave to go to the writer's room for that. So then I was working in television, and then came back to finish my MFA while still working in television.
Oh, interesting. Okay, so it was all kind of jumbled up, but
all the things, all the things.
Right.
And then I was working in games and TV, and then now just working in games because it's taking up all my time.
Right, which is awesome. But so before we get to what you're doing now, just with the academic part, I'm just curious, like, what was that like? So what is a game design program like? I don't think we've had anyone on the show who's done a formal program. That might be wrong. I apologize if so. We've talked about certain theorists here and there and things like that, but I'd be very curious to just get your take on like that experience, basically.
Yeah, sure. So NYU Game Center, their goal for structuring the program was to structure it like an art school program. So that is sort of like the style of the program. So it's really, and I would say like NYU and USC, similar to their film programs, their game programs are also sort of like, I feel like they're similar in some ways, that like the USC program is a little bit more industry oriented, and the NYU program is a little bit more indie oriented generally. So it's geared towards like, you will learn all the things you might need to make a game yourself. And you're working in groups, but you're also doing a lot of work. I guess it's the goal. They treat you like a artist. So it's about figuring out like, what do you want to say? Like, how are you using this medium to express yourself? And that is NYU's sort of, especially for the MFA program, is really like, hey, like, we're going to teach you how to do this stuff, but it's really about what are you trying to express with it, and figure that out through doing these projects, and much less about like, you're going to become like amazing at modeling by the end of this.
Right. You'd have to get those skills kind of not on your own necessarily, but like in conjunction with the deeper, more theoretical framework of like what games do. So it is a more philosophical. Yeah. Nice. It's more about like developing your sort of like artistic practice, I would say. Well, Chris, do you want to ask something about video games since we've now arrived?
So yeah, Claire, what were the steps? I mean, I know you were still working in television while you were going to school, and I'm assuming a little bit afterwards as well. But what were the steps to becoming a full-time video game developer, to working in that world, or as a narrative director specifically?
Well, my first real game job was working on that VR game Lovesick for Rose City Games, which I got. I started as a contract writer on that, and I got that. I was reached out to by someone who I had met sort of like who knew me sort of through film, was the executive producer on that, and they thought I would be a good fit for that because they were looking for someone who could bring sort of like more authentic and naturalistic dialogue and story structure to that, which I had sort of like from my film background. But I also I was the original writer on it, and also I was the narrative designer on it. So I also was bringing like a lot of the structure to it, because they had kind of like a lot of initial. I came on pretty early to the project, so that when they were they just had the pitch for it. So they had a lot of like the ideas for it, but it was really like, how are we going to structure this? How are we going to work out the lore for this? How is this going to be told in VR when you like can't see yourself, for instance, right? There's a lot of like weird limitations to working in VR. So that was sort of like how I was brought on. And it's I don't know if I said this already, but it was like a virtual escape room type experience where there's a lot of like puzzles, but it's also story heavy where you're talking to characters, and you're inside, you kind of like go inside their heads. And so the puzzles that you're dealing with are related to their problems and stuff, and that you're working out together as a band. So the puzzles needed to be kind of like integrated with their personalities. So it was definitely a fun project to work on.
That's really cool.
And it was, yeah, and it was cool. It's like for an indie studio in Portland. So I was working on that remote. And then I also ended up, while I was working on that, writing a DLC for one of their other games, Floppy Nights, which is kind of like a 2D tactics game, which was really fun and totally different style. And then, I mean, I saw like on Twitter, like Naughty Dog just posted that they were like hiring a writer. And I mean, you know, The Last of Us was one of the games that like really like inspired me to want to like take this other path. Right. So I was like, I'm going to apply. So I did, and they thought I would be a good fit. So yeah, I got hired to come on and work as a writer at Naughty Dog. I guess it's been about 3 years now.
That's incredible. Can I ask you, so designing Lovesick, you know, you're doing narrative design, you're doing you know, the specific writing for it. What does the interplay look like? Did you design the puzzles that went with each person's personality, or was there like a kind of back and forth between the design team and you about how that looks and works? I'm just kind of curious about the process for that, because that's interlinking, you know, like the narrative structure with very specific mechanics for each one of those.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. We worked together. It was a pretty relatively small team, but we knew like pretty early on, we decided like what the powers would be. So like which determined like the major mechanics of the game. And then, you know, each person's sort of world that you would go into would have like, we would figure out like, okay, what's this going to be? And then I would work with the designer and the creative director to come up with like, okay, well, what's the arc here? What's the sort of like emotional journey, right, that we're going on? And then how is this being supported by the puzzles and the mechanics? And we would do, you know, kind of get that outlined, right, and go back and forth with a bunch of like we'd brainstorm, go back and forth with a lot of that stuff. So it was very collaborative.
That's awesome. I think maybe that's a good segue into our next question, which is, you know, specifically designing video games and kind of narratives for video games. What do you see as some similarities between that design process, you know, with Naughty Dog or with Lovesick, and tabletop game design?
I mean, I think when I was in school at Games Center getting my MFA, I was like really impatient to make my projects look good. So like, you know, especially like video game projects that I was doing in Unity and Unreal, and I'd be like, oh, I want to put like great textures on everything. I want to add the lighting, add the fog, right? Like because I was like, you know, like you want it to look good, especially because I think I was so, in particular, I'm very attracted to mood. That was such an important part of what I was often trying to get across. And I was like, well, I want to get to that mood fast, right? Like, I'm like, people won't get it if the mood's not there. So I would try to kind of like rush to that point. But I now appreciate that how important prototypes are, and how important it is to do paper prototypes, and how important it is to do block mesh prototypes, and how important it is to playtest things. And I think that doing now, like especially we do a lot of prototyping at Naughty Dog, and I think it's very important to prototype the specific thing that you want to find out about, right? and like focus on the question that you're trying to answer, not all the things, right? Because you can get beautiful art. Eventually, you can even make just a beautiful, like in hindsight for my projects, I should have just made a beautiful corner of beautiful art that was just for mood or whatever, right? And then done another prototype that was like just block mesh, just to test out like traversal, or just to test out, can you understand where the goal is or whatever, right? Like test different things with the most appropriate prototype for that purpose. But I was just trying to do them all at the same time because I was like, I want to get it done. So now I appreciate more doing things for the proper function, I think, than I did then. So I think that that's also extremely valuable. That's something that's valuable for video games. It's also extremely valuable, I presume, for tabletop. I think when I was doing my deck-based tabletop game, I would try to playtest like the whole thing, and it would take hours. And it was really hard to get people to commit to that and actually get through the whole thing. And so I think in hindsight, I would have gotten a lot more revs out of prototyping and playtesting like individual elements. Like, hey, we're just going to do the build phase. Let me just do that a bunch and get the player, like getting the character build tight. So I'm curious how that has been for you both, how much you playtest your games, and if you do it in pieces.
Yeah, that's a really good question. I'm curious, Chris, how you're thinking about it, because you're actively doing it now for Danse Macabre, right? Still,
yeah.
I mean, I know that's, and I can say a little about how Stillfleet came together and some other things we're working on. But yeah, how is Danse Macabre going in terms of that modularity of like different aspects of the overall play loop? Because it's not just one play loop, right? You can break it down into character creation, taking on the quest, combat is a big one, social encounters, environmental encounters, sort of faction level or meta level. Like, is there something there that's looped?
Yeah. No, I've been taking it in pieces for sure, because I agree, Claire. I think it makes the most sense to like double check the functionality of everything before kind of moving on to the next. So yeah, I mean, with Danse Macabre, the first thing that I built out was the kind of character creation section, and then like bugged my partner to make characters and made a bunch of characters myself, and then had friends who were playtesting just go through character creation to make sure that it like made sense and felt good, and that things were clearly communicated, and that the concepts as they were introduced made sense. And then after that, yeah, it's just kind of going through. I think I did combat next, just because it's it's a part of the game that I think a lot of people are going to be drawn to. And right now it's more, I went through a phase where I was doing a bunch of one shots, and right now it's more trying to like something I'm taking notes for is like, okay, how do I write like the GMing section, the chronicler section of the game, and trying to figure out how to like really build out successful campaign play using the game. So yeah, I think that iterative process, I don't think I've been quite as thoughtful as you were, Claire, when you were articulating it. But yeah, I do find that it's really effective just to kind of break things down and make sure that it works. And then I think maybe my approach is more of like, okay, so I figured this part out. Now the next session, we're going to do this and then it's going to be this chunk and kind of approach to things.
Yeah. I think it's interesting. There's stuff you can kind of pen and paper yourself or ask your friends about. And there's stuff that comes out of live playtests with randos.
Yeah. So I should say
I've seen our games. Yeah, go ahead.
I was going to say, yeah. So I should say that the current stuff, it's all live randos. It's like we have Discord playtests, and then also some in-person stuff through some different groups. And yeah, I think that's also a good point. It's important to get the people that you don't know playing the game, because sometimes their feedback can be a little bit more honest. But it's good to have both.
Yeah, and it's interesting what pieces you'll get more feedback on, like at a con, at least for again, it may be very different video games, but for RPGs, they take a long time, as you're saying. So to get the real experience, you'd want like 4 hours, but often at a con, you only have 2 hours. So you're trying to get a lot of people to have a fun experience in 2 hours. So the worst thing you could do is spend a bunch of time on character creation. Yeah. The best thing you can do is give them really fun pre-gens and say, if you want to change the name, change the name. We don't care, right? We just want you to play, but we want you to have a character who already has fun powers, an implied one sentence backstory, even if it's just like the craziest duck in this cartoon town. Well, why am I so crazy? I don't know, whatever it is, like you have to give them figured out, and then have them have really fun hijinks where they have a lot of agency and they get to explore their powers and they learn the game and all that. And another thing I've learned is you do not need a long rules. Like, just say we'll figure it out. We've adopted the internal strategy of like learn by play. We'll give you a 2-sentence intro to the system, but you're going to learn it when you need to, because I'm going to call for a check because lava starts spitting out of the mall and you have to run away from the lava. So you have to make a move check, right? And like, you'll know that because I'm asking you and you're rolling 1 dice and it's not that hard. And so you don't need to like know a lot beforehand. You're just going to look at your sheet, be like, cool, move dice, D8, I'm going to roll a D8, right? So that's, so that's all to say. I think there's things that you can test really easily with randos. And I use that term very lovingly, very positively, like really nice people who don't know you, who sit down, and there's things you can test with your friends, non-derogatory randos. And there, I should say, strangers, people who don't know. Sure. And there's things you can test yourself, pen and paper, or with your friends or your partner or whatever. So, maybe different with video games and at the scale of work where you have big design teams. But I imagine there's a lot of, analogy, whatever overlap there.
I'm curious, my question for you guys, I'm curious, like, how much do you, besides playtesting, do you like prototype like different versions of your systems?
I think so. I think speaking to Dance Macabre, we've definitely there's been I think now 3 versions of Dance Macabre. So it's gone through these kind of like different iterations to get to the point where it's at now. But kind of the original game, it was like 1 player, 1 GM thing. And then last year we put out Dance Macabre Prima Mors, which was kind of our quick start-ish version and closer to the game that it is now. And then, I think, the final iteration is what we'll be putting out soon, ?
Yeah, soon. Yeah, later this year. And the grid system overall, I mean, it was originally just Stillfleet, right? Yep. And it was the Stillfleet system. But then when we wanted to do other things with it, even before Blister Critters, I think we sort of were like, we'll probably make other games using this. It works. Blister Critters was our second RPG using the same system. But even then, I mean, it's fairly similar. Dance Macabre is much further. They're all still easy to understand if you've played one, but they're not really the same game. They're kind of using the same inspiration. And that was actually a freeing moment when Chris and I realized that about their game, that they wanted to use the dice a little differently. And we were kind of thinking along the lines of having had conversations with Spencer Campbell, who's another indie RPG designer, who had suggested, that these things are really, they're sparks, and you yourself, even as one person, can like use the same idea differently each time. So they're not exactly backwards compatible. It's kind of a question of whether you want things to be compatible or just kind of easy to learn, like they're in the same world. Yeah. So for us, I think we've approached each game as its own unique thing that doesn't need to be exactly compatible, but we've tried to keep a certain design ethos so that the games, are sort of similar, like you get a sense of what the company's doing. And also they are easy to learn because they're going to be along the same lines, right? The powers will be different, but the dice you're rolling will be the same kinds of dice, the same kinds of ranges, the same level of math, right? Yeah. But I will say, I mean, that is a really good question. And I think in terms of like Stillfleet, which was the first one we published, we're actively thinking through a few changes that would be bigger, to even just things like combat that are just never quite satisfying as a GM who wants everyone to do political intrigue. But some people want to do tactical round by round, more video gamey, like fighting a giant mech as a group. And so you have to kind of make that fun, I think, to deliver a game worth $50 or whatever, right? So it's like, I think that is work that we're still doing that would not affect, it's like, I care less about backwards compatibility and just that each book that's published, I guess, is really as good as it can be on its own. And again, maybe that's similar to when you release an update for a video game, even if it's changed something from the past, I don't know, but you want it to be like, you want that thing to be as fun as it can be, right? So, I don't know. I don't know. I'm sure there's a lot of things that are not similar because video games are more complex in that sense, where you're like simulating physics a lot more realistically than like roll a D8 and there's a 3 in 8 chance that a thing happens. But I think in the same world.
I think Baldur's Gate 3 has been really interesting in that regard, right? Because it's kind of it's a D&D simulator. Kind of, right? It's extremely close. But they were extremely involved in the community, had a very long beta period and have released a series of updates once the game came out that actually continued to change rules based on feedback, which was really interesting to see.
Yeah, and you see that with like Cyberpunk 2077 as well, right? It's like, the original release of that game. I didn't play the original. Like, I heard it was unplayable, and then I was like, cool, that's enough for me. But then, yeah, they released a patch that I wouldn't say changes like a ton narratively in the game, but it changes a lot of the mechanics around character creation and upkeep, and yeah, it's like a huge update to the game, which I feel like fair play. You listen to the community, they hated what you put out, you fixed it for them. That's great.
Yeah, definitely. So Claire, given time, I don't know, do you want to, are there any questions that you want to get to that we didn't cover? I think there's a couple here, like we talked about one just fun story about playing RPGs, which is pretty fun. So I don't know if that's like a quick, good ending before we wrap it up with like, where can people find you?
One quick fun story about RPGs.
You mentioned playing in France, so that was the specific. Sorry, that was the leading thing where I was like, oh yeah, I'm just asking about
Claire. What's it like playing RPGs in France?
I got my undergrad degree in comparative literature, for which I needed to speak French, and so I went to study abroad in France, and so I was taking French, in the mornings. But where I really was actually using French was playing Dungeons and Dragons every day. I went to Montpellier in the south of France, and I found, it was during the summer, but I found this, it was this D&D group. They had it was incredible. They had this cave. It was literally underground, incredible spot where it was packed pretty much every day, huge tables. And I joined this game and I played hours every day in French. And that was really where my French improved way more than taking French classes or living with a French family or anything else. Was playing Dungeons and Dragons.
I mean, they say that immersion is the best teacher, and what better way to immerse yourself than also immersing yourself in a fantasy world?
I learned very specific words.
Right.
Everywhere, but which now, of course, that was a long time ago. I've forgotten, but that was.
No, that's great. That's how we're learning medieval Latin, is by making Chris's game and
true.
having to look up.
Learning medieval Latin, Turkic, Arabic, and Greek.
Yeah, so
super fun.
We were talking about Disco Elysium before, and I don't know if you haven't played it, I highly recommend playing Citizen Sleeper.
Oh yeah, Citizen Sleeper is great.
Okay, you have played. Okay, good.
Well, I have not. I keep hearing this, and I totally believe you and Vex and everyone who's told me. So that's it is top of the list. Yeah. I know I need to make time.
Wythe, I think
it's just a schedule.
You in particular would really, you would really like Citizen Sleeper. It's so graphically light. It's basically, I would almost say it's like a visual novel in a lot of ways, with RPG elements thrown in the mix. But it's a great game, really good. Especially, I mean, it's like somebody read Stillfleet and then made a video game.
Well, one day maybe that'll happen. Wink, wink, nod, nod. But until then, I will play this game that everyone keeps telling me is great. I believe you. You all were right about Disco Elysium. I'm sure you're right about Citizen Sleeper. I can play one a year.
Yeah.
Given my schedule and just my brain, because I'll just be reading other things instead of playing games.
It's also not a huge time commitment either. So.
Yeah, you got.
It's not like which was a massive time commitment.
You got 30 hours.
Well,
to
I'm
burn.
told there's going to be a new. Was it Heroes of Might and Magic? I remember this game series as a kid that we played on a PC. My little brother and we were really obsessed with. It's like a tactical D&D.
Yeah, they're doing a new one.
Skinned. Yeah, they're doing a new one. My little brother texted me, and I don't know if that's true. So I've not. This may be fake news, guys. I don't know. But if that is true, then I'll have to do Citizen Sleeper before that comes out, because that'll have to be now we're old, but we still do this one thing, obsession for some amount of time. So Claire, thank you so much. I feel like we should talk more. Not only could we, but we should. And maybe we could play some games, and we could do one-page games. We could do your games. And we could even do Wraith, the Oblivion.
We could do your game.
We could we could definitely do Stillfleet anytime. And we could do that on a show or just as friends hanging out. but that's for another day. For today, is there anything else you wanted to say that we haven't gotten to? And otherwise, where can people find you? What's the best way to get your games that you're making?
Well, the game that I'm working on right now is at Naughty Dog is called Intergalactic, the Heretic Prophet. The trailer is out now, which you can search on the internet and check out. It's pretty cool. If you want to look me up on the social, I'm not super active on social media, but you can look up my name on Blue Sky and you can find me there. Lovesick is available now on the Meta Store if you have a Quest. Floppy Nights, which I wrote the DLC for, is on Steam, Switch, and Xbox. And come out and play that tabletop game is one of my friends who I made it with. It's on his website, which is thebef.com. So you can download it there if you want to play it.
Thebef.com. I'm going to the Bef. I'm going to download it.
Is that?
I should probably.
I'll link it.
I should probably put it on my site. Be lazy, but
I'll link it in the show notes. But is it BEF? The Bef?
2 Fs.
Oh, okay.
Like his name's Jeff.
Got it.
It's like good Beffer Bef.
Yeah. The very Bef.
Yeah.
Very funny.
The Bef around, no one will ever keep you. Okay, so
wow, ending with the song, amazing.
We're keeping that
in. Yeah,
keeping it in.
We're keeping it. Claire, thank you so much. You're fabulous. We want to talk to you. We want to play games with you. Chris, anything else you want to add? Any final notes, or should we close this one out?
Let's close it out, Wythe. But thanks so much, everybody, for listening. And yeah, this has been Why We Roll. Thanks for listening to Why We Roll.
Our theme music is by the brilliant Sam Tyndall and Arpline.
If you enjoyed the show, please subscribe wherever you get your podcasts.
You can find us on all social media at Stillfleet. You can find out more about Danse Macabre, Stillfleet, and all of our games over at stillfleet.com.
Hey there, Hugh from Podderation here, and if you like today's show, why not have a listen to the All Things Nintendo podcast? Hosted by Brian Shea, former director and Game Informer and lifelong games journalist, the show explores the ins and outs of gaming's oldest company and one of its biggest, featuring interviews, featuring reviews, featuring everything you want to know about the world of Nintendo. If you'd like to learn more, check out our website at podderation.com.